I just want to let you know that there are a couple of additional workshops coming up in March. And so I'm going to tell you what they are. And then what I'm going to do is drop in the chat where you can find the information about those websites. And then also going to put in the chat where you can go to find recordings of prior workshops. So we record all of our workshops, and after they are transcribed and closed captioned, we make them available on the website. So there might have been some that you missed. You can go back and take a look at them. For example, before this workshop, we had one a couple of weeks ago by Janie Hauser on supporting faculty, the mental health of your faculty and staff. So that's another informative video that should be coming to our website fairly soon. We're right at that 2-week mark. So the two upcoming workshops are not repeats, but they're essentially a part B to them because they were so successful when we offered the first version. So the one that's coming March 15th, and again, all of this will come to you in an email. It'll also go through e-news, but just want to let you know what's coming. Engaging online learners in the second half of the semester. So one of them we offered right in January before school started, and now we'll be about halfway through the semester, and it's a workshop with Sarah Morris, Robin Hissom, Stephanie Lorenz, Milena Bernstein, and the moderator is Suzanne Kitchen. The second one that we have coming March 16th, it's Self-Compassion, the Heart of Mindfulness. So this is the second meditation workshop by Monica Letma. She did some guided workshops for us in January, and they were absolutely wonderful. And we thought right about the middle of the semester, again, it might be useful to learn more and to learn more about mindfulness. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to the speakers for today, and then I'll drop that information in the chat. And there will be time. Did you want them to ask questions during the session, or did you want them to hold them as you're going along, or did you want them to ask as you're at the end?
I think it might be easier if they ask at the end, but if something is really pressing, Melissa, that we're not addressing, feel free to interrupt. You turning it over to us now? All right, well, good. Well, I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm T.M. Hawkins. I'm the director of the Counseling Center, and I'm joined by Dr. Claire Barbetti. And Claire has a PhD in English literature from Duquesne and a PsyD from Chatham. And I was very deliberate in asking her to join me today because she's taught on the faculty at Point Park, Duquesne, and Chatham, where she taught medieval literature, poetry, and Chaucer. So I think she's quite equipped at talking with faculty about how to manage sort of distressed students and how to help students who are challenged by the pandemic. She's a clinician also who specializes in trauma, working with LGBTQ students and healthy sexuality. I'm really pleased to have her here doing that heavy lifting today. So Claire, if you want to, can you share the PowerPoint?
Yes, thanks, Tian. That was a really lovely introduction. I'm really happy to be here today, you all. All right. Let me share. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Thumbs up, great.
All right, so we got through that. Okay, so want to go to the next slide?
Yes, sorry, it is giving me an issue here. All right, there we go.
So we want to start with a diversity statement because everything happens in a context. And we're going to talk more about sort of this context, when we talk about the pandemic and how minoritized faculty, staff, and students are managing the downstream effects from the pandemic. But I wanted to, and I'm not going to read this to you. We'll provide our slides to you, so that you'll be able to have the content. Let me turn my phone off. Of course, it rings right when I start the presentation. But we're committed to fostering a supportive and inclusive environment for members of the entire WVU community. We're especially committed to making sure that our Black and Brown students, our colleagues, and our community members know that we stand with them. We stand with Black Lives Matter movement. We acknowledge that there are ways in which the clinician community has disenfranchised Black and Brown individuals. And we want to acknowledge and take full responsibility for ways that we have not spoken up, for ways that we have not been a part of the solution. And we are committed to doing better. We can do more in supporting the needs of our Black and Brown students. So our goal, is to make sure that we're committed to anti-racism work and diversity. And we believe that provides a context for all of the work we do in terms of outreach and in terms of clinical work with our students. So we stand with you. Go ahead. So our agenda for today, it may be a little overwhelming. I don't know where that picture came from. That is not me, but we may be here a little while. We're going to talk a little bit about sort of what our students are facing. We'll talk about a trauma trifecta. I'll share some data. I'm going to share too much data probably. We're going to talk about PTSD. What the heck is that? We're going to talk about how students manage, and we're going to give you some specifics in regards to teaching and learning, and we'll share some resources. We could talk to you for 4 or 5 hours and not give you all the tools that we think you're going to need eventually. And that's not a me angling for another invitation, Melissa, but this is a longer workshop. This is more information than we can provide in an hour. But we're going to give you a taste of, I think, some things that will be important. So go ahead. So trauma, it's complex, okay? And trauma, especially, in these uncertain times, in these strange times, I think is even more complex. What we know is that trauma, events that happen to us collectively, chronically, or acutely, we know that the trauma absolutely impacts us. And we're in a system right now, or in a cultural context right now, where there are multiple traumas that we're experiencing. We can experience sort of big traumas with a capital T and smaller traumas in a collective way that sort of erode away at our psyche, and that can cause us to feel frozen, that can cause us to feel exhausted, that can cause us to be distressed. That can really collectively overwhelm our capacity to cope. And some of you who've joined us today, you may be feeling some of that. I know that when Claire and I were putting this together, we talked about the fact that, we're tired too. Sometimes we feel frozen too. Sometimes we struggle with connecting because in this context of a pandemic, many of the things that we would do to care for ourselves are challenging. Go ahead. So there's this trifecta, and what's this trifecta? So we have the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm all about context. I'm a psychologist, so psychologists always look at context and data. In terms of this pandemic right now, we've lost 2 million lives, and the numbers continue to rise, 10,000 every day. Those are scary data. All of us are affected directly by this pandemic now, and that changes sort of how we live our lives, how we work, our identity, and our experiences. It changes how our students live. It creates financial stressors. It creates disconnection and isolation in ways that we as a society perhaps have never experienced. We also have this social upheaval, this racial oppression, this polarized politics and Black Lives Matter. We have another pandemic that is affecting our minoritized community that absolutely creates this trifecta of collective traumatic stressors. Nothing has been spared from this viral storm. All of our rites of passage, all of our common social discourse, all of that has been impacted by this collective storm. Go ahead. So all of this happens again in context because our students come to us, and they have the same developmental concerns that they've always had. They have the same academic concerns, relationship issues, family conflicts, identity, career exploration, all of the same kinds of issues that we all struggled with when we were in college. And then there's also this what I would say is maybe it's not a trifecta, Claire, maybe it's a quadfecta, you know, because we have the snow and ice apocalypse. I don't know about you, but, we had inches of ice, that we were scraping off cars and, and then we have the issues related to winter time in Morgantown, the increased isolation, the inability to exercise easily. And then we have the seasonal affective disorder because of the gray. It's absolutely sort of what I would say would be, a trifecta or a quadfecta for sure. And all of this contributes to sort of this existential angst and may overwhelm our students' capacity to cope. Go ahead. So some of this is context. So there's lots of headlines about student mental health right now. We know that students are zoomed out. We know that they're lonely. We know that they're tired. We know that about our faculty as well. Look at some of these headlines. What's the point? Some, young people's despair deepens as COVID-19 crisis drags on. Who thought that we would be here, a year later? And here we are. There's lots of uncertainty about what the next few months and what the next few years will bring in terms of this, of the COVID-19 response. We know that stress and depression have increased for students, and we'll talk more about that data. Go ahead. So we know that we're seeing increased loneliness and stress and anxiety in students. We know that there's uncertainty. We know that there's abrupt transitions. We also know there's a lot of data here. We know that students, overwhelmingly report higher levels of anxiety, stress, and depression. We know that pre-COVID, as enrollment would increase, if there was a 5 to 6% increase in enrollment nationally, we know that the participation in college counseling centers was up by 30 to 40%. We also know that anxiety and depression drive these increases in utilization. Another sort of sad piece of data is that we know that the threat to self, students who feel like they want to harm themselves in response to stress and in response to trauma, we know that has increased for 7 years in a row. We also know that 10% of our clients utilize 40% of our sessions, which is an increasing number for us to look at. So we know that our students have more uncertainty. We know that during the pandemic, there's all these abrupt transitions, this dismantling of social support systems. We know that students are grappling with many of the same questions and concerns that we grappled with. Go ahead. We also know that sort of pre-pandemic, we had increases across the board in crisis interventions, drop-ins, and with anxiety disorders, and increases in counseling centers. So the take home for that, honestly, is we were busy before and we're busy now. Go ahead. And we're busy, thank you very much, because you guys are doing such a great job referring students to us. Go ahead. Turn it over to you, Claire.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tian. So we're going to talk about this thing called PTSD. It's not a formal diagnosis. The American Psychoanalytic Association came up with this term to describe the experience that all of us are going through, pandemic trauma stress experience. So what is PTSD? I think this is a very useful label that we can, kind of contextualize things for ourselves as we're going through all these various emotional reactions, et cetera. So PTSD is a constellation of individual, family, community reactions to the COVID-19 pandemic. So these reactions include emotional reactions, cognitive behavioral, somatic, social. All these different realms of our lives as human beings are affected. So you might see in yourself, you probably see in your students increased frustration, despair. One of the things that I'm noticing more and more of is the feelings of powerlessness. Clients that I've done really good identity work with, really good self-esteem work with, have kind of gone backwards with that. Their not good enough feelings are really popping up right now. It makes sense with all the uncertainty that's going on. You might see that students are not learning as well. There's fuzzy thinking, increased mistakes, loss of focus. You might notice it in yourself as well. And of course, there's disruptions to normal patterns of behavior. Their sleep schedules are off. They're not eating like they usually do. There's lots of disruption right now. Somatically, many of them are feeling kind of on edge. The anxiety is increased. They're hypervigilant. They're waiting for the next news item to drop. They're wondering, is this day going to be kind of normal, or what's going to happen? And some of them have actually kind of started a sort of addiction of sorts to looking up news constantly because of that feeling on edge. And then there might be, you know, more absences because of things like migraines, gastrointestinal issues. They're definitely all tired. I think, like Tian was saying, we're all tired. And socially, increased withdrawal, isolation. What we're finding is the more people are feeling isolated, the more they get kind of stuck in that pattern. There's a kind of inertia there where they can't move out of it. So more isolation breeds more isolation. And of course, there's fear of others as a source of infection, and a lot of loneliness. So these are some general adaptation strategies that the American Psychoanalytic Association recommends. And I'll quickly go through them. A lot of them, you know, make sense, kind of no-brainers in a way. Go easy, rest as much as you can. All the changes that we're experiencing make us more physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted. Feel your feelings. This one's pretty big, and I see a lot of students who try to suppress instead, and I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about that later too. But our feelings, when we don't feel them and process them, they stick around and start to cause some problems. Our feelings need to be completed. So it helps to find a label for them and feel them. Be curious, find delight, make it a practice. A lot of students are bored in their daily lives, and they need joy, they need interest, they need stuff to get them going, and it's just simply not there with the pandemic. So one of the big recommendations is to find delight in small things. One of my favorite interventions right now, and it's not something I used to use a lot, but I'm using it a lot right now, is to ask students to grab something that's meaningful out of their rooms and show it to me and tell me the story behind it. So it gets them thinking and attaching meaning and joy and wonder to small things around them. Seek physical sensation and movement. Exercise, of course, is a no-brainer. What a lot of people don't recognize is touch starvation from not being able to hug others. So we're not getting enough touch. Again, something to think about, self-massage. Some people recommend hydrotherapy, so hot, icy cold showers. ASMR, that's been a craze that's taken off and it's helped a lot of people. Yoga, all sorts of things that people can do, not only to exercise, but to give themselves more sensation. To help with the feelings of not good enough, all that, the kind of powerlessness feelings that students have, and perhaps we have too, there's a recommendation to begin to focus on loving your own unique powers. It's just reconnecting with that is very important right now, no matter how small your own unique power is. And then asking for help, very important right now, and helping others, because helping others gives us a sense of purpose. It gives us a sense that we're actually accomplishing something in the world, and so forth. So these are the general strategies recommended, but students also have additional considerations that we need to look at. So PTSD affects undergrad and graduate students differently. We look at where undergraduates are developmentally. They're dealing with issues around identity, finding out who they are, and learning to become more independent, moving away from home, finding out what it is to choose their own classes, to make their own meals, figuring out how to do taxes, all these kinds of things. The changes that the pandemic has caused disrupt their social exploration that they need in order to figure out who they are, who am I with others. So this can look like during class, as you see them, a loss of interest in studies, lack of motivation, less confidence, less participation, sense of alienation. When we're not doing that identity work, life kind of starts to become flat, especially for this age group. So the pandemic changes also disrupt their routines that they need to learn and be practicing in order to become independent. And this can look like inability to complete assignments, missed class, confusion about expectations, less confidence and self-efficacy, not believing that they can accomplish things, and needing more hand-holding. And I know that this age group some of them already need quite a great deal of hand-holding, but now it's increased even more. And there's confusion about expectations. There's an inability to, I think one student was telling me, I asked her how many meals a day she's eating. She said, oh, just one, because we just can't go to the cafeteria. We can't bother to be going to the cafeteria in the ice and snow, and there's nobody there, there's no point. So there's no point to eat any more than one meal because, yeah, the routine's not there, the socialization's not there. So yes, their keywords are identity, remembering that, independence, purpose, and social bonds. All right, so graduate students developmentally are dealing with issues around forming connections within their professional worlds in authentic ways. So more than who am I or who am I with other people, but who am I going to be in the world? Who am I going to be in my job, in my profession? Pandemic changes have obviously for many of them disrupted future plans and professional careers. So this can look like in class, as your experience with students, like extreme anxiety. There's so much uncertainty about the future. And it can look like somatic symptoms. So illness, GI issues, migraines, missed class. The changes have also disrupted their ability to present their authentic self in professional realms. So this can look like hiding their mental health problems, diminished performance, less emotional capacity, and greater difficulties adjusting to change. It might even look like kind of getting a sense of them just feeling plastic and not able to connect with them at all because they're just kind of in this frozen state of, well, what am I going to do? The keywords for them: responsibility, professionalism, performance, personal professional balance.
Hey, Claire, I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Yes.
One of the things that sometimes psychologists at counseling centers will talk about is that sometimes undergraduates will lead with their mental health difficulties and graduate students will hide them at all costs. And that's something to remember because they really sometimes will deal with them very differently.
Yeah, definitely.
I would also add that what we're saying about graduate students applies to professional students.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about developmental issues, but then, then we can layer on top of this effects for minoritized students as well. Because of disparities in the educational system, medical, economic, political, you name it, minoritized students, there's projected to be a much greater learning loss for them. And dropout rates as well are projected to be much greater for them because of the pandemic. So as we know, racism, sexism, ableism, classism all have serious effects on our students. They have effects on trusting authority, asking for help, self-efficacy and empowerment, all the things that can help them with anxiety and depression are not available to them because of discrimination. So I think it's important too to recognize, oh wait, I missed something. No, I'm good, okay. I think it's important too to recognize that we have a lot of first generation students on our campus and a lot of students from Appalachia, as well as a lot of low income students. And these students are very highly affected by this. I apologize, that's my cat. And they may not be as visible. So it's something to look out for. If you look at the graph here, this details, this is from the CDC, the differences in loss of life among races. And you can see definitely as we're getting into 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, there's big disparities. So there's more death and loss of community, friends of family for many of our minoritized students. So what this can look like for them is disengagement, difficulties with attention, a lot of misclassed, decreased performance, again, an inability to ask for help or to trust authority, that anybody will actually be able to help them. Okay. And then we have our international students as well. So this information comes from a recent Student Experiences and Research Universities survey, the SARU survey. What they found was international students worry most about maintaining good health and managing immigration and visa issues. And you can see in the graph here, these two issues are the greatest. And of course, our graduate students, the gray is graduate and professional students, and the blue is undergraduates. Our graduate and professional students are worrying a lot more. Other important issues for international students include financial support, worrying about where the money is going to come from, healthcare navigation and access, job opportunities. What is their future going to look like? Some of them want to stay in the States. Are they going to be able to do that now? Some of them don't. What is going back to their country is going to look like, especially if their country has been, devastated by COVID and there's been lots of changes there. Travel restrictions are an issue. And then xenophobia and harassment. So this same study, the SARU study, found that a quarter of international students, both undergrad and graduate professional, were concerned with discrimination, xenophobia, and harassment. 17% of undergraduates reported, 17% of undergrads and 12% of grad students reported that they had experienced intimidating, hostile, or offensive behavior since the pandemic started. So it's a big deal. So this can look like disengagement and increased avoidance, decreased performance, anxiety, and overworking, kind of drowning themselves in work to try to avoid, the fear, all the emotionality that's around this. All right, so what do we do about this? Well, I want to talk a little bit about how this affects their learning, because you're the teachers, you're the ones helping them learn, trying to teach them something, and their learning is definitely affected by all of this. So this chronic low-grade trauma affects memory in certain ways. So I'll briefly give a little explanation of how the brain works with memory. So typically, the brain, we have two pathways basically through which we process information. There's the subcortical and the cortical. So low road processing and high road processing. High road processing takes sensory information through the thalamus, up through the neocortex to the amygdala. So what happens there when this information gets to the neocortex is it's arranged, it's organized, it's given language, a story it's made sense of before it gets to the amygdala, which is the station that helps us make decisions. Low road processing, however, goes straight to the amygdala. So that information is not organized. It's doesn't have a story behind it. It's not contained. It's in bits and pieces. Under severe chronic trauma, let me say this first. Under severe trauma, acute trauma, it's just going to be going to amygdala. Low-grade chronic trauma, we're going to have memory information being processed through the high road, but what happens is with chronic cortisol release, the cortisol actually affects the way that the neocortex organizes the information. So it's not getting organized in the way that it's supposed to be before it's sent on to the amygdala, hippocampus, and so on. So their memories are kind of, still little bits and pieces, even though it's not, severe acute fear that they're experiencing constantly. It's more this low-grade chronic pressure of, oh, what's going on? Their memory, all that cortisol is going to be affecting how they store their information. So the other thing that happens with them is that many of them try to deal with this by suppressing emotion. And that actually takes a lot of work for all of us to do. It causes a physical strain that elevates more cortisol. So it's just this horrible feedback loop there. So bottom line is it's affecting their memory and learning. What do we do about it? So Tian, since you are such a good caretaker, do you want to do this one?
Yeah. So first of all, what do we do about it? We're going to give you some very specific tools. But first, for those of you who had the opportunity to see Janie Hauser's faculty staff assistance program, she made some of these points. We have to put our own air masks on first, our oxygen masks on first. We've got to take care of ourselves first. So for all of us, we have to think about doing less. This is the year of just being good enough, just doing something good enough. We don't have to do it well. We don't have to hit it out of the ballpark. We just have to do it good enough. And that's what we're looking at. We're also looking at, can we do less? And with our students, do they need to do less? Practicing self-care and self-compassion are going to be absolutely critical. You may not be able to get things graded with the timeline that you're used to getting, assignments back to students. Your turnaround time might not be the same. Your ability to organize lectures, your ability to respond, you may not be as responsive. Maintaining social networks is absolutely critical. This is the year of disconnection and isolation. And what we know about isolation is the more isolated that people feel, the more depression and potentially anxiety that they experience. We also know that impacts their level of functioning. Getting sleep is critical. All of the data on sleep tells us that we have to have a good sleep routine. And it's really tempting when we're disconnected from routine and from people to stay up at all hours of the night. And I'm talking to nursing faculty I know who do that, staying up at all hours of the night, to work. What that means is that we're not in a routine. So getting into a sleep routine is critical. And then asking for help when you need it. Getting help from colleagues, from family, from counselors, if and that can be very helpful for many folks. Go ahead, Claire.
Oh, I just wanted to add to here that I recognize how many hats you all are wearing right now. As we do, with prolonged crisis, we wear many hats. And so I know that you've all got to be really tired with not just being teachers, but kind of parents and advisors, counselors, care managers, social worker. Like you're, doing so much at once. So please do take care of yourselves.
Yeah, let me make one more point, or two more points. That if you can avoid the doom scrolling right now, that's critical. And it's really easy to pull up your phone and to look at the news, to look at Huffington Post or whatever your doom scroll of choice might be. It's critical to limit that. Other data really suggests if you can get outside. If we can get outside a couple hours a day, an hour a day, a half an hour a day, that is going to be rejuvenating and helpful. Let's move on. I know we have a lot of strategies we want to get to.
Okay, so how do I set my students up for success? Have to take care of yourself first, of course. So addressing developmental needs for forming identity and relationships, and some of those undergraduate needs. Definitely work on creating times and spaces to build relationships to relieve some isolation. There's many different creative ways we can do this. I know that Zoom limits us to an extent, but allowing some space in classroom time for conversation, for being interested in one another can do a heck of a lot. Developmental needs for career performance, self-efficacy, authenticity. Validate and normalize your students' fears about the future. They're real, and yes, and validation helps them trust themselves and trust their own feelings about things. Hold conversations about how the pandemic has affected and will affect their profession, and frame the changes with them. So, give them labels for things, but ask them for their opinions and perceptions too, so that they're included in the process of labeling what's happening right now. Needs for minoritized and international students. It's so important to recognize and remember that they have additional stressors placed on them. Remember, they've got all the developmental stuff going on, but then other things, and minoritized students may have multiple different identities that put them at greater risk. Remind students that you're there for them and will listen to them. And listening, again, is really important, not just fixing things for them, but really just sitting with their emotions, sitting with them and listening and saying, yes, I hear you. Reach out when you notice changes in these students. Something as simple as, hey, I notice you've been looking extra tired. Hey, I notice you haven't been participating in class. If you need to email them, that's easier for you, do that. Have resources for these students on hand. So we'll have a number of resources at the end of this presentation. We know we have lots of departments here on campus that can help students. All right, so best practices to address effects on memory and learning. Mindfulness interventions are really effective. They're simple but powerful. I would say that probably one of the most effective classes I ever had was just a regular practicum training class, but the professor was very interested in mindfulness, and she instituted 5 minutes of mindfulness in the beginning and 5 minutes at the end. And there were various things like breathing exercises, meditation, quick visualizations, things like that. And of course, the students complained about it at first. They're like, why are we doing this? This is dumb. But by mid-semester, everyone was looking forward to it. And everyone was centered at the end of that first 5 minutes. People were participating more. It was highly successful. And I've since instituted that with classes that I've taught and also with students I see in therapy. So ideas for this, you can definitely contact us. One of our therapists, one of our staff members can teach short mindfulness interventions. We're doing a lot of outreach right now. So that's something that we could definitely do for you. 2-to-1 breathing is an intervention that you could do at the beginning of class. It's so simple. Basically, 4 counts on the inhale and 8 counts on the exhale through the nose both times. Visualization guided imagery exercises are very calming and centering, as are recorded meditations. And both of those, you can find just scads of them on the internet, YouTube. Insight Timer is a really great meditation app that's free and offers a lot of things. So I think something important to recognize is that trauma experiences are not just they're not just detrimental. Post-traumatic growth can happen for people. They can actually strengthen us. But in order to do that, people need to be together, whether it's virtually or not, and they need to be able to language around the event, make meaning of it. So encourage storytelling, encourage finding language to describe their experiences wherever possible. I think that feeds into the next one, which is interface their present experience with the content wherever possible. So making it relevant for them is super important. One student that I had many years ago was a Chinese student, and I think it was a composition class, and he was a mathematics major, and he could not understand why he was in that class. There have been various things going on campus as well. Like, I think there had been a school shooting. So there was all sorts of, like, context was just crazy for him. And he was really struggling to learn anything. He just wasn't involved. I remember taking the time with him to check in. He was also, like, very, very socially awkward. So I'd check in with him, see how he was doing, ask him, about any social experiences he was having. And then I made an effort to interface what he really wanted to learn in mathematics with what I was doing in composition. So considering his needs, I ended up assigning some essays on physics and mathematics in my composition class. So it was really good for him to be able to put this together and understand why composition might be important. And it was good for the other students too. They learned something about mathematics and physics. I had the flexibility to do that. So in whatever way you can interface that, that's really important, because then they start to attach themselves and their emotions to the learning. Consider implementing pass-fail structures wherever possible. Those can be helpful. And consider scaling content back in favor of more process or praxis for material that's essential that you really do want to include. And of course, be flexible. I think this is a really great time to emphasize that line on the syllabus that says subject to change because of needs during the semester. However you tend to word that on your syllabus. Okay, so let's talk about some resources. Tian, do you want to?
Yep. So, so those are some great ideas, Claire, and we'll have a chance to respond to questions related to strategies and skills. But we have a plethora of resources. These are all on our website, and these are all on the PowerPoint, but we're available to provide support. We partner with Adventure West Virginia, and we do some we like to call it Zoom bombing, but I'm told I'm not supposed to do that. But we will come into a virtual class and provide a meditation or provide an experience if that's helpful. We work closely with the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and they have lots of resources on working with minoritized students. We also work closely with the International Student Scholar Services, and we consult with them regularly when we have issues related to international students, and the same with the Office of Accessibility Services. More and more of our students are requesting accommodations, and we partner very closely with them. Go ahead. Another really important resource, which I hope that you've already heard of, but I just want to mention is the University Care Team. This is a part of campus and community life, and the Care Teams is a behavioral intervention team of faculty and staff who meet weekly. And what we do is we staff students who are struggling. Many of you have submitted care reports. And the website for submitting a care report is available on the slide and available online. But you can reach out to the care team if you have a student who's really struggling. A student who appears to have substance issues that are getting in the way of their performance, or a student who's been really impacted by economic scarcity or a death. The care team will help intervene and provide support and resources. Go ahead. In terms of the Carruth Center services, all of this is available on our website. That's a great meme. Claire picked out the meme. That's good. But we provide these kinds of outreaches to faculty and staff and students. We're really struggling a bit with the pandemic right now. We're not. We're mostly doing virtual telehealth with students right now. We are available to see students in an emergency in person. We're doing outreach with students. We're hoping as early as next week, we'll be able to start assuming some outreach outdoors with students. And in a couple weeks, we'll be able to do some more outreach. We have psychiatrists who are available to meet with students and assess them for psychiatric medications. We have a learning disability and attention deficit, an ADHD assessment clinic. That clinic is on pause right now, but I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks, we'll have that back up and running. We have a student assistance program for students who are struggling with substance use disorders, and we're available to consult with you. We have someone available 24/7 if you have issues with students. We have an after-hours service that's available that provides crisis intervention for students on the weekends, at night. We have a crisis text line that's available for students. And then we have the My Student Support, My SSSP, which is a online counseling and a virtual counseling service that's available for students who are living out of state. We have lots of resources for students who need support. And we're hopeful that you'll continue to refer students to us. I think that's our last slide, Claire. So I think we can open. Yeah, I think we can open this up to questions. And so we're available to respond to your questions.
And I think a follow-up to that is a question that's asked in the chat, and it's essentially it's similar to what Scott was asking. How would he know if his student had been if someone had made contact with the student? Because you can submit those reports and everything, and you might be engaging with the student, but the faculty member might not know that that's in process. So is there any feedback given to the faculty, like, we've got this, we've made contact, or do you guys just typically go quiet and put all your energy toward helping with the student?
No, I'm feeling a little hesitant to speak for the care team because I'm not the chair of the care team. But what I encourage is that there's the feedback loop, and so that the faculty members know, people who've submitted the care reports know that there's been some contact made. If that's not happening, it should be happening. And I'm certainly very willing to talk with the chair of that committee and to ratchet that up, because that's important. It sounds like that you're not getting feedback. I will bring that to the chair of the committee.
If I could just follow up on that, I want to make
one of the things that came to our attention in the letter from our Black and Brown students last summer was sort of the gap between being a minoritized student on campus and not seeing counselors that reflected back in terms of what they look like. And I'm just wondering, have you made any recent changes to take that into account? And do you have additional plans? And could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's right on. And one of the lessons that was so painfully clear in that petition is that we were not reflecting, in terms of the demographics at the counseling center across the university, we're not reflecting our student body. And so one of the things that we immediately did was we looked at our recruitment strategies and looked at sort of how do we diversify our staff. We were able to hire a BIPOC counselor. We've been able to hire, we called back from retirement John Spraggins, who worked with us for many years, who's working with our health sciences students. And we just launched national searches with Spellman and Johnson, who specialize in creating diverse pools. That's their specialization, so that we will attract at the leadership level, hopefully sort of a diverse applicants and be able to diversify the counselors. I think that's absolutely accurate, and it's a challenging problem, and we can do better. We can do better for sure.
It sounds like you've made some strong initial strides. That's great.
Yep, thanks. We're working on it, but we, it's a hard one, but we're going to keep working. I just proposed a fellowship program, and I'm meeting soon with the social work program to talk about creating postmasters fellows. And that would we would hire the graduates from our social work program and train them, do their licensure supervision, keep them for a couple of years. But the goal would be to grow our own. And we would look at sort of creating positions that were sort of BIPOC related, generalists, and sort of adventure West Virginia experiential therapy. But the goal would be to diversify the staff and to grow our own at the center.
There's also been a similar program out of libraries. I don't know if you talked to Karen.
No, I haven't, but that's great to
Yeah,
know.
it's a different model than what you're proposing, so it might be interesting to look at both of those.
No, that's great. Thanks.
There's a lot of thanks in the chat.
That's great.